students, so today we'll be starting with the revision of chapter 15, which is biodiversity and its conservation. So first let's have a look at the session objectives and then we'll move forward with the chapter. So in this chapter we are going to cover the following topics: introduction, patterns of biodiversity, loss of biodiversity and conservation of biodiversity. Starting with the introduction, the term biodiversity was popularized by Edward Wilson, and it basically describes the combined diversity at all the levels of biological organization, right? So जो पूरा combined diversity है that is present at all the levels of all biological organizations, that is referred to as biodiversity. The three main important aspects of biodiversity are as follows. First one is genetic diversity. Genetic diversity it gives us an idea about how a single species might show high diversity at genetic level. तो एक particular species genetic level पे कितनी ज़्यादा diversity show कर सकती है, इसका एक example है medicinal plant होता है एक Rauwolfia vomitoria, जो एक तरह का chemical produce करता है which is known as reserpine. Reserpine is a chemical which is used to lower high blood pressure. Right? Reserpine is used to lower high blood pressure and it is produced by this medicinal plant. Now this plant grows in different Himalayan ranges, right? Different Himalayan ranges पे ये plant grow करता है, and depending on where this plant is present, किस particular range पे ये present है, it differs in the potency and concentration of reserpine. तो reserpine की potency और concentration different होगी. Same plant है, but just based on because it is growing on different locations in that Himalayan range, उसमें जो reserpine की concentration and potency है, that is going to be different, right? Another example is that India has more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice and 1,000 varieties of mango, so that itself is a very huge example of the genetic diversity which is seen. Next, species diversity, the diversity at species level. For example, Western Ghats have a greater amphibian species diversity as compared to Eastern Ghats, right? So that is the second aspect of biodiversity. Third is ecological diversity. तो ecosystem level पे भी हमें काफ़ी ज़्यादा diversity देखने को मिलती है. For example, इंडिया की अगर हम बात करें, it has deserts, rainforests, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, etc. and it has a greater, obviously it is going to have a greater ecosystem diversity than, for example, a country like Norway. Right? So that all these three, genetic, species and ecological, are three aspects of biodiversity that are seen. If we look at some statistics, according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN, in the year 2000 said that the total number of plant and animal species so far are slightly more than 1.5 million, right? अभी तक बहुत से ऐसे plants and animals होंगे जो discover ही नहीं हुए हैं, that have not been discovered yet, right? So this number actually is, supposedly should be very, very higher because there are so many plants, animals, protozoans that have not even been discovered yet, right? More than 70% of the species that are recorded are animals. So animals जो हैं 70% का margin cover कर रहे हैं, and plants जो हैं वो around 22% of the total cover करते हैं, right? Animals की अगर हम बात करें तो सबसे ज़्यादा जो space cover कर रहे हैं, that is insects, right? So among animals, insects are the most species rich taxonomic group, right, making up for more than 70% of the total. So more than 70% of the animals, they are insects. अगर हम एक और एग्जाम्पल देखें, द नंबर ऑफ फंगस स्पीशीज इन द वर्ल्ड इज मोर देन द कंबाइंड टोटल ऑफ स्पीशीज ऑफ फिशेज, एम्फीबियंस, रेप्टाइल्स एंड मैमल्स. सो सिर्फ फंगस की स्पीशीज इतनी ज्यादा है दैट इट इज इवन मोर देन कंबाइंड total of the species of fishes, amphibians, reptiles and mammals. So that gives us an idea about how much diversity is present in case of fungus. Right? Next we look at the patterns of biodiversity. First is latitudinal gradients. So the diversity of plants and animals, it is not uniform throughout the world, but it shows a sort of an uneven distribution, right? बिल्कुल यूनिफॉर्म नहीं है ये, एक पैटर्न शो करता है, एक तरह का अनइक्वल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन शो करता है. व्हाट इज दिस अनइक्वल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन? इन जनरल इफ वी से स्पीशीज डाइवर्सिटी डिक्रीजेस as we move away from the equator towards the poles, which means that species diversity is going to be maximum at equator, and as we move away from the equator towards the pole, so towards the pole जो हमारी स्पीशीज डाइवर्सिटी है इट इज गोइंग टू डिक्रीज. So towards the poles, the species diversity decreases. So species diversity decreases as we move away from the equator towards the pole. Example, जो tropical area है, they harbor more species than temperate and polar areas, right? Tropical areas that are closer to the equator are going to have the maximum species richness as compared to temperate regions and polar regions. Example, Colombia, which is located near the equator, has about 1400 species of birds, while New York, which is let's say located in a temperate region, has only about 105 species, and Greenland, which is situated at the poles, has only about 56 species. So here we can see that as we move away from the equator towards the poles, right, जो species हैं birds की, they are declining. The number of the species of the birds are declining as we move away from the equator towards the pole. Right? If we talk about India, India has more than 1200 species of birds. Amazon rainforest, that is located in South America, has the greatest biodiversity on earth. It is a home to more than 4,000 species of plants, 3,000 species of fishes, 1,300 species of birds, 427 species of mammals, 427 species of amphibians, 378 of reptiles, and more than 1,25,000 invertebrates, right? So that is how rich it is as far as species diversity is concerned, right? Why is it so कि इक्वेटर के पास स्पीशीज डाइवर्सिटी ज़्यादा है, टेम्परेट रीजन्स में थोड़ी कम हो जाती है, पोलर रीजन्स में और कम हो जाती है? तो इसका रीज़न क्या है? व्हाट इज़ द रीज़न टू इट? रीज़न ये है, देर आर 3 reasons that are being classified. First reason is that speciation is generally a function of time. ठीक है, स्पीशीज डेवलप होने में टाइम लगता है, एंड दैट टाइम शुड बी अनडिस्टर्ब्ड, राइट? एक अनडिस्टर्ब्ड टाइम रिक्वायर्ड है फॉर द जनरेशन ऑफ मोर एंड मोर स्पीशीज, राइट? Unlike temperate regions subjected to frequent glaciations, tropical latitudes have remained relatively undisturbed. तो जो temperate regions है, polar regions है, they are subjected to frequent glaciations. Tropical regions की अगर हम बात करें, relatively they have remained undisturbed, right, for millions of years, and that has led to, or that has given a long evolutionary time for species diversification, right? So one reason is this. Second reason is that the environment present in tropical regions, tropical environment less seasonal है, relatively more constant and predictable है. तो जो क्लाइमेट है वो भी एक बहुत ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है. क्लाइमेट अगर बहुत फ्रीक्वेंटली चेंज हो, अनप्रिडिक्टेबल हो या बहुत ज़्यादा वेरिएबल हो, देन ऑब्वियसली इट इज़ नॉट गोइंग टू सपोर्ट स्पीशीज डाइवर्सिफिकेशन, राइट. तो टेम्परेट रीजन का अगर हम क्लाइमेट देखें तो वो अनप्रिडिक्टेबल है, वेरिएबल है, इट्स नॉट दैट कॉन्स्टेंट. ट्रॉपिकल एनवायरनमेंट का जो climatic conditions hai, they are more constant, and that is why it supports, or it has more species diversification. So constant environment promotes niche specialization, right, and it leads to a greater species diversity. If we talk about the third reason ये हो सकता है that solar energy is available more in the tropics. Solar energy कहाँ ज़्यादा available है? Solar energy ज़्यादा available है in the tropical region, and that is why the productivity in tropical region is high, and high productivity directly or indirectly may contribute to a greater species diversity, right? Next, we are going to talk about the species area relationship, right? Species area relationship was given by a German geographer, Alexander von Humboldt, and he said that within a region, if we look at a region, within a region, species richness increases with increasing explored area, but only up to a certain limit. So what did he say? He said that species richness increases with increase in explored area, but up to a certain limit. एक लिमिट तक, एक सर्टन लिमिट तक अगर हम एरिया बढ़ाएं, अगर हम एक्सप्लोर्ड एरिया को इंक्रीज करें तो स्पीशीज रिचनेस इंक्रीज होगी, बट ओनली अप टू अ सर्टन लिमिट. आफ्टर दैट इट इज गोइंग टू हैव, और इंक्रीज इन एक्सप्लोर्ड एरिया इज नॉट गोइंग टू हैव एनी इफेक्ट ऑन स्पीशीज richness. The relation between species richness and area turns out to be a rectangular hyperbola, as we can see in the graph that is given. And if we take out the logarithmic relation, the relationship is a straight line, and it is given by the equation log s equals to log c plus z log a. Important equation है, इससे क्वेश्चन आ सकता है किसी एक की वैल्यू ना देके बाकी सबकी वैल्यू देके आपको जिसकी वैल्यू नहीं दी है वो निकालने को बोल सकते हैं, राइट. सो इफ यू नो द फॉर्मूला यू कैन सॉल्व दैट क्वेश्चन वेरी वेरी इजीली, राइट. सो यहाँ पे हम देखें, S represents the species richness, A represents the area, Z is the slope of the line, and C is the y-intercept. So this formula is important to remember. Ecologists have discovered that जो Z की value है that lies in the range of 0.1 to 0.2, right? So regardless of the taxonomical group, regardless of the region that we are taking into consideration, it has been observed by ecologists that the value of Z always lies in the range of 0.1 to 0.2. But it has been seen that if we consider very large areas like entire continents, अगर हम एक बहुत large area के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं जैसे कि एक पूरा continent, तो जो Z की value है that can lie in the range of 0.6 to 1.2, right? एक stable community के लिए what are the requirements for the development of a stable community? पहली जो requirement है, it should not show too much वेरिएशन इन प्रोडक्टिविटी फ्रॉम ईयर टू ईयर. ज़्यादा डिस्टर्बेंसेस नहीं होनी चाहिए, ज़्यादा वेरिएशन नहीं होनी चाहिए. अनडिस्टर्ब्ड कंडीशंस are required for the development of a stable community, right? Second thing, it must be either resistant or resilient to occasional disturbances. ठीक है, अगर एक कम्युनिटी हर छोटे से डिजास्टर से या हर छोटे से डिस्टर्बेंस से फॉल अपार्ट हो रही है, right, then we cannot call it as a stable community. So a stable community must either be resistant or it should have that power to recover, right? It should be resilient to occasional disturbances. Those disturbances may be natural, may be man-made, but it should be resilient to those disturbances. And it should also be resilient to invasion by alien species, invasion by foreign species. These are the 3 points that are required for a stable community. Rich biodiversity is not only essential for the ecosystem, but it is also required for the survival of human race on this planet. So why are we talking about, conserving biodiversity? All the animals, on all the plants around us, what will happen if one day we wake up and all of them are extinct, right? We feel that we are not dependent on them, but indirectly, yes, we are dependent on all the organisms that coexist with us. Directly or indirectly, we are dependent on all the organisms that coexist with us. And therefore, loss of any species can indirectly affect us, and therefore we should adopt measures in order to protect biodiversity, because everything creates a balanced ecosystem. अगर एक चीज लूज हो रही है तो वो बैलेंस बिगड़ जाएगा, राइट? इकोसिस्टम का जो एक बैलेंस बना हुआ है, that will be lost. So what all are the reasons of loss of biodiversity? Before getting into that, let us look at some statistics that are given. So according to the IUCN Red List, which covers all the extinct species and the species that are highly endangered and vulnerable and are on the verge of extinction. So according to IUCN Red List in 2004, it documents the extinction of 784 species that include vertebrates, invertebrates and plants. So in the last 500 years, around 784 species have become extinct. Some examples of recent extinction are the dodo, quagga, stellar sea cow, etc. Right? The last 20 years have witnessed the disappearance or extinction of 27 species. So that is a very, very alarming number if we look at it. What are the causes of loss of biodiversity? तो इन causes को हमने 4 points में divide किया गया है. There are basically 4 reasons that one has come up for the probable reasons why this loss of biodiversity is taking place at such an alarming rate. First reason is habitat loss and fragmentation. अगर किसी से घर छीन लिया जाए उनका, obviously that organism is not going to survive. Right? How is that organism going to survive? If you take away their habitat, or if you break their habitat into fragments, एक बड़े से habitat को अगर हम छोटे pieces में break कर रहे हैं, then also that organism is not going to survive. So that is the exact idea behind habitat loss and fragmentation, and it is the most important cause that leads plants and animals towards extinction, right?